Hello Hero, it is Hope Pennington and I am here with another Friday's Fandom Fun. Today I thought I would do a little homage to my booktuber friends and do my top 4 recommendations for clean sci-fi and fantasy. These are actually all written by Christian authors and they are actually good, which I hate to say is a rarity, but it really is. You go into a Christian bookstore and you see Amish books, you don't expect Christian sci-fi and fantasy to be very well written, but these actually broke the mold for me. I've sifted through, filtered through tons of sci-fi and fantasy that was just a drag to get through, and I found these are the only 4 Christian sci-fi and fantasy books that I found that I actually loved. So yeah, I thought I'll share that so you don't have to go through all those books. And if I find any more, I'll do another video. Most of you know one reason I got into writing sci-fi and fantasy myself is because growing up I read Narnia and Lord of the Rings. After that I started frantically searching for any other good sci-fi and fantasy for young adults, and I couldn't find anything. And so I started writing my own, and my older sister Grace started doing the same thing. And so we just were sick of there not being any good sci-fi and fantasy anymore. So I tried out the Aragon series, didn't like it. Tried out the Redwall series, didn't like it. Tried out, I can't even remember, tons of just like Christian fantasies or just like independent pop fantasies or just like, and I just couldn't get into any of them. But these are clean, and actually all of these, 3 of these are written by independent Christian homeschooled authors, which is epic, that have actually come out with good stuff. And then there's one of these is written by a Christian author who is, it was actually in the Christian bookstore, which was what? Because most YA fantasy in Christian bookstores, if there even is any, is no good. So, number 1. So you might think I'm a little bit biased. This is the only sci-fi on this list, and frankly this is the only modern YA sci-fi that I've ever liked, ever. So if you like science fiction movies and you are trying to find good modern YA sci-fi, this. Firmament Radialloy by J. Grace Pennington. Yes, that is my sister. No, that is not why it's my favorite sci-fi novel series in the universe. It's my favorite because it is epic. It's basically Star Trek, let me think. It's space exploration series about a young adult girl who works as the assistant to her father that's a doctor on a starship exploring the universe. The characters are amazing. There's tons of fun banter. As far as target age, just young adult, which is anywhere between a teenager to 20s, 30s. But I think really anyone could enjoy it. As I said before, it's super clean. There's no mature content, but it's still like super exciting and fast-paced and an easy read. So yeah, check it out. My second book is On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. This one I actually did find in a Christian bookstore, which is pretty rare that I actually like fantasy that I find in Christian bookstores. I've read a couple of the people. I've read some of Brian Davis and Chuck Black. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're not my favorite, but I've only read 1 book by each, I think. So I couldn't speak for all of them. But this was the first book I read by Andrew Peterson. Definitely more aimed at middle grade, but I've still really enjoyed it. It's reminding me of Narnia as far as being a children's book, or like The Hobbit, as far as being a children's book, but just super charming. It just doesn't have that like cheesy Christian feel. It's just an actually really cool story about these kids that live in this fantasy world. Let me read the back cover for you. Andrew Peterson spins a riveting tale for all ages following Janner, Tink, and Lily Igby and their trusty dog Nugget in escape from the vicious fangs of Dang, who seek the lost jewels of Anura. Quirky characters and their world of wonder from the edge of the dark sea of darkness to the deadly Glibwood forest and beyond sets the stage for this epic adventure that includes songs, poems, an ex-pirate grandfather, toothy cows, and the real sea of dragons, tours of Ankle Jelly Manor, Pete the Sockman's treehouse, suspenseful legends of fascinating lore, genuine recipe for maggot loaf, authentic hand-drawn maps. So this is an adorable, hilarious book, and I would highly recommend it. Completely clean and totally charming. The next one on my list is Resistance by J.L. Knight. She's, again, one of an indie Christian homeschooled author. And look at that big hunkin' book. It lives up to its big size. When I bought this one because I was looking for recommendations for wanted to support more homeschooled fantasy authors, since that's what I am, but I didn't know which ones were actually good. And I'd read a few of their fantasy books, and I tend to find them pretty cheesy and pretty predictable. But her book, Jay's book, takes this a step up. Like, at first when I started reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is nothing like Christian indie homeschooled author fantasy that I read before. It's not cliche. Once I started reading, the beginning is riveting, and then once I started reading and it gets more into the plot, I guess I felt like the plot was similar to some Christian homeschool fantasy that I'd read before, but it's like she did it better. It's like she took a common theme and a common storyline, but just made it, kicked it up a notch. And this is just the first in a trilogy, fantasy trilogy, that exists in the same universe. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of those. The final one, I like to, how people say eye candy? I think of this as like this book. If Firmament was if Lord of the Rings is like a steak and buttery potatoes and like vegetables and beer or maybe like good wine or something, and Resistance is homemade bread and butter and a good meatloaf, and On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness is like cookies and milk, maybe more like blueberry muffins or something. And Firmament Radialloy is like an iced latte and like Thin Mints. This book is like M&M's. It's like M&M's. There's just sugar and candy and fun and easy and everything. So this book is written by Carly Gernhardt. It's called Fable Weaver. She's also a homeschooled independent author, and she's homeschooled. This was published through a publishing company, a very small publishing company though, and she's a homeschooled author. It's just so fun. Like, I don't even think she tries to stick to a storyline. Tries to stick to like a structured book very well. There's definitely structure to the book. There's a beginning, middle, and end, and there's a good theme and characters. There's amazing characters. But she has no fear of just running all over the place. Like, basically the plot of Fable Weaver is that this girl can how does it go? She can tell stories. Like, she can control the stories of books with her words. So it's like, when she says something, let's see, she has to focus when she's doing it, but when she says something, it happens. She can read characters in and out of books. She can change the endings to books. She can change the endings to stories. And she has these teenage-looking guardian changelings looking after her. She reads characters that you're familiar with from every book, from all these classic books, from Lord of the Rings to Snow White to, let me think of what other books she referenced, just books all over the place, to characters from Merlin. She reads in and out of each other's books. She goes to this fantasy world where all of the book characters exist simultaneously. She's this average teenage kid that just likes video games and food, and her changeling guardians are hilarious, and they just banter. Half of the book is just them bantering, and it's just fun. I mean, there's just nothing not fun about this book. So, recommend it for all ages, totally clean, really funny, and adorable. So, that is my top 4 sci-fi and fantasy, clean sci-fi and fantasy recommendations. The links to all of these books in the descriptions if you want to check them out. They actually most of these have really cool websites I can link you to, find out more about them. And yeah, so there's my recommendations. Thank you so much for watching, and we are Epic Heroes. See you in the next video. Bye! Hello, hero. I'm Hope Pennington, and I totally forgot how I was going to start this one. Well, frankly, it's the only YA sci-fi, modern YA sci-fi. This is the only